I'm fine.
This is KUGAN CASSIUS for IFL TV. It's the 4th of Jan, 2024. It's actually my first interview of the year. Delighted to be joined by boxing correspondent Gareth A. Davies. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, Cougs. How are you? It's first, I think your last interview of the year, I watched it just today, was with Eddie Hearn. It was fantastic. He looked like he was in the Caribbean somewhere.
Yeah, it looked like he was in the Caribbean.
A lot of fascinating stuff in there as well.
Yeah, a lot to kind of dissect, and we'll come on to the Eddie Hearn and like his kind of final comments before the year turned. But just a kind of little recap.
4 out of 10 for yourself last year, though. That was the funniest thing on the interview. Was it? Didn't you give yourself a 4 out of 10?
Yeah.
That's a very below par year, isn't it?
Yeah, but listen, you got to aim high, and then hopefully we get to a 5 or a 6 this year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gareth, just let's recap back in quite again a manic week, another manic week in Saudi Arabia. Quite a lot to kind of pick through from this, with the implications of what will happen in 2024. I mean, let's start with kind of the curveball that was thrown in by Joseph Parker's exceptional win, dominating win over Deontay Wilder. Yeah, I mean, was it really a shock?
I think the shutout was a shock. I think the lack of menace that Deontay Wilder had in the ring in those 36 minutes was a bit of a shock. But we've been saying for a while, Joseph Parker's very active in 2023, 4 fights. I know one of them was it Jack Massey, who was a cruiserweight against him. But no shame in his whole year. And I think Joseph's looked in fantastic shape. George Lockhart's helping him. I think it helps the nutritionist and chef. And I think Joseph's very happy up there with the Fury team. And there's a great elision there and a great union with them. I sat with Joseph in that Bedouin tent in the Crown Plaza the day after the fight. And I do genuinely think it was a career best performance. And was it a shock? I think the levels of his concentration for the 36 minutes were extraordinary. I think that was built into the shock, if you like. But I just think the biggest shock was the lack of menace that Deontay Wilder held. You can't just say, oh yeah, but he's always that poor technically. He's always found something. So you have to question whether the fights with Fury really took it out of him. It looked like there was ring rust early in the fights, but I don't want to take anything away from Joe. But Deontay Wilder's 39 this year, and he may be coming to the end. But I don't think he's finished. I do think he'll have a couple more fights.
Obviously, we learnt over that kind of that weekend that the fight with Joshua and Deontay Wilder was in fact signed prior to them going into ring on that night, subject to them both winning. I mean, we know this is not going to be the case come March, but is it? And Eddie Hearn used the expression or the term "dead in the water," but I mean, would you still watch it?
Dead in the water for now, he said. No, I wouldn't watch it at the moment. I think Deontay needs to show something, get in the win column, maybe fight Ngannou, maybe fight someone else like a Makhmudov, or he's got to fight someone else. I don't see how, because Joshua's stock, I mean, just to mention Joshua, I think that for me was one of his career best performances as well. People can question the validity of Wallin, but technically Joshua was absolutely on point. He chopped the tree down and the tree couldn't find its roots to come up and go into the 6th round. I thought it was an outstanding performance. I do think Ben Davison and Anthony Joshua is a brilliant kind of match up together, a great kind of union, if you like. I think they'll stay together. I hope they do. Always thought that from the minute they started working together. Ben is very emotionally intelligent, very wise on his tactical achievements. And actually, I spoke to him in the week, didn't use the quotes till fight day. And Joshua did exactly what he said he was going to do. And, you know, Joshua could have got Wallin out of there any time from the third round onwards, in my view. Lovely to see some combinations from him, intent, stepping forwards, utter dominance. And I mean, I did say to Joshua after, I thought it was technically, that's that in this phase 3 of his career, we've got the ebullient, aggressive Joshua allied with really using his IQ. I thought it was phenomenal. And I think Joshua's stock has risen so much to the extent where Wilder's fell in that fight that we know we've got to see Joshua in, maybe against in a fun fight against Ngannou, but I think in a Flip Hrgovic fight potentially for the IBF title next, because obviously the other two heavyweights who I would say are above him in the division, i.e. Fury and Usyk, are already tied up.
Excuse me. So, I mean, look, we're in a little bit of a short space of time now in relation to finding out what happens with that IBF. We know Fury and Usyk fight on Feb 17th, etc. But what do you think the route Anthony Joshua is most likely to go down? Eddie Hearn has mentioned, obviously, that Philip Hrgovic route for the IBF, depending on what happens with that IBF title. But then there's Zhang, there's Ngannou. What do you think he does, Gareth?
Well, there's Parker as well. I think you could potentially put him in with Parker, but I think he's looking to be a 3-time heavyweight champion in the world. If they want to fight in March, the potentially the IBF title is available. But I think we know that Fury and Usyk have signed for 2 fights, so they're likely to fight, say, February, but maybe then at the beginning of the Riyadh season, depending on, let's say, there's a controversial draw or something in that manner happens, and it's an even bigger fight, the second one, and it's a blockbuster, let's say, and they have to do it again. Joshua, I don't mean he's going to be treading water, but I think that IBF may well become available. I see that as a great fight for him. It's a hard fight as well. Hrgovic is no pushover and really wants the Joshua fight. Spoke to Flip about that. But the route for Joshua now is stay winning, stay improving to the level he's already at, which is phenomenal at the moment. Maybe fight Ngannou, maybe fight Flip Hrgovic or Ngannou and Flip Hrgovic in 2024. And I think early 2025, he could have either the trilogy with Usyk that Ben Davison fancies. And I get it, because I think for the first 9-10 rounds against Usyk in the second fight in Jeddah, Joshua looked fantastic. And that's where that frustration came at the end of the fight, where he got the belts, of course, and tossed them out of the ring. But if Fury wins, we've got Fury on for 2024. And even if Fury is saying at that point, you know, I've had enough, my legacy's complete, I want to walk away. I think where we are now with the available funds for all these guys and the Super League, if you like, of heavyweight fights in Saudi Arabia, I think we can get very early 2025. We finally maybe get Fury Joshua. I mean, it's really come alive, the heavyweight division, in the last few months. I did urge patience all of last year when a lot of the critics are always there, but when the critics were saying, you know, so-and-so's holding it up, or this guy won't sign, you know, potentially by the first third of 2025, we can see this current generation really play out. And maybe at that point, we won't know who the number one is, because you might need 2 Joshua Fury fights. If you recall, they signed for 2 fights way back when and were just a little way away from fighting before Deontay Wilder won his arbitration case in the States for that trilogy fight with Fury. But my word, it's an exciting way to begin 2024.
Yeah, I mean, still a lot of it's up in the air, but I think we do know that. I know a lot been referencing to the fights that we've had in 2023, but I think in 2024 we are kind of going to see kind of possibly those fights that we actually want to see. I'm not knocking 2023. I think we had some decent fights there, but I think 2024, I think there's pretty much no excuses now for some of these fights not to happen.
Yeah, and also let's say Wilder gets back into the win column and he doesn't win against Fury and he looks good again. We can get Usyk and Wilder a fight that we perhaps need in this generation as well. You know, Parker has made himself a player. Look, there's 10, 11, 12 heavyweights there at the moment who are in that group, if you like, that Super League. You know, Fury, Usyk, Joshua, Zhang. I mean, Zhang we haven't talked about here. Well, you've mentioned him, but again, I can see Zhang having a couple of fights over in Saudi in this Super League. Zhang at 4 or Parker at 4, 4, 5, those two. Wilder at 6. Kabayel looked good the other day. Frank Sanchez is going to come through. Jared Anderson will be thrown in the mix, I imagine, by the end of the year. Daniel Dubois looks good again. Andy Ruiz was out there. I mean, you can just start to see. I mean, Bacoli, for example, who, you know, they're saying that has been avoided by everyone. Again, Bacoli. Let's get Bacoli in the mix there. He's a very dangerous animal for all of them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to ask you, you would have seen Bacoli's social media post about via the GoFundMe link that he put into his tweet. I'm sure you've seen that. What did you make of that?
I didn't see the GoFundMe. What I did see was Billy Nelson putting out that I think that 3 or 4 of the guys were offered to him. It might have been on an IFL TV post, actually, saying that 3 or 4 guys he'd offered to fight, but they'd all said no, the Sanchez's and some of the other guys. So, well, I know I missed the GoFundMe.
So this was a post that came from Martin Bacoli's Twitter account with a link to a GoFundMe page. I mean, okay, I think it's been deleted now.
Oh, well, we can't comment then. What was it about then? Why would it? Was it a spoof or something?
No, it was. I think that the headline of the GoFundMe was "Help me realize my dream of becoming a world champion." I didn't go too much into it. I saw it getting a lot of traction. I don't know how much money it raised, but it looks like it's been taken off. So I can't refer actually back to it.
He's definitely an avoided Cougs. He's definitely an avoided guy in the division. He's a very powerful puncher. He's a great fighter. Billy's always claiming that Bacoli is avoided. It doesn't surprise me. But I think he'll get his time. I do think he'll get his time if he's patient in the next couple of years. Because, as I say, it just occurred to me, I hadn't mentioned Bacoli. He definitely belongs in that top 12, top 13 in the division and deserves his shot.
Yeah.
Certainly some of the others to move himself up the ladder.
Yeah, I mean, it is baffling. Like I said, Bacoli does seem like he's one of them kind of, if there was a list of avoided fighters, he'd definitely be on that list. So I don't know what quite the score is there about why Bacoli isn't in the mix with a lot of the guys that we're mentioning, because I'm sure he would run a lot of these people close. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think the issue is you've got 5 or 6 of the guys that are really commercially powerful, and they hold a lot. And you know, money talks, business always talks, and you know they draw the numbers. But I think he's just got to stay patient. I think he is in that bottom 6 to 10 of the heavyweight division. If you look at technically what he's done, what he's achieved, but I just think he's just got to stick at it, and I think he will get his opportunity.
Just to kind of recap on 2023, who was your fighter of the year for 2023?
He sat in front of me with his father Bill while I was doing the broadcast of the Day of Reckoning for TalkSport. It's definitely Devin Haney. I thought he was good against Kambosos early in the year, showed strong power. I thought his ability to withstand Vasyl Lomachenko late in the fight, one of the most technical fighters around, did a brilliant job in that. And then his performance against Regis Prograis was very, very good. I think we're beginning to see the start of greatness. Physically, he's growing. He's my number one, and I'd say probably Crawford Terence Crawford too, even though he fought once in an era-defining fight against Errol Spence, the manner of his victory. And also, I picked Naoya Inoue because, you know, going up again and becoming an undisputed champion in another weight class. The monster is phenomenal. And if I was picking a fighter from the UK, I was really impressed with Lee Wood last year. Loses to Mauricio Lara, comes back and is outstanding. He was brilliant against Josh Warrington. And if I was picking a female, I'd say it's Katie Taylor.
Yeah, there was a lot of shouts for Terence Crawford, even though he only had the one fight. It was quite a significant fight Terence Crawford had in 2023 by beating Errol Spence. You see an argument there, Gareth?
What, Crawford as fighter of the year? Yeah, of course I see the argument. It was the manner in which he beat Errol Spence. It was and I wouldn't mind seeing those two meet again at light middle, if I'm honest. But Terence Crawford is, I think, along with the likes of right now with Dimitri Bivol, is one of the most technically proficient and efficient fighters on the planet. I mean, I do want to see bigger challenges for him. I want to see. I mean, people poo-poo this, but a mega fight, and it is a big stretch for him. I'd love to see him fight Canelo. I really would. I just think he can handle himself in there against Canelo. It probably won't happen. It's up a couple of weight divisions, obviously, a couple of three almost. They might have to do it at catch weight, but I just think Crawford's got the ability to do it. You know.
So, I mean, one of the talking points, obviously, from 2023 was I don't know if you call it a bromance, but the coming together of Queensberry and Matchroom, something that we hadn't seen in this capacity ever. But in Saudi, it happened, and it worked. And it's a bit weird now, kind of seeing Frank talking and not praising, but kind of talking in a positive light about Eddie Hearn, and Eddie Hearn doing the same thing, where they're looking to kind of work together via obviously Saudi. We know why this is happening or how this has come about. But yeah, that's been quite interesting to see that kind of dynamic between Hearn and Warren not going at each other and not being, they're still obviously competitors, as they both point out, but it's good to see kind of this kind of dynamic in the relationship.
Not great for your industry because they're not hammering each other all the time, and it doesn't create that kind of clickbait. But the sport needed it. If you remember, I mean, I did an interview with Bob Arum leading into Day of Reckoning Fight Week, and if you recall, Bob Arum worked with Don King a few times. When they had big fights to make, they always worked together. Yeah. They're working together now because the money's available, the fights can be made. They've both got diverse characters who need to come together and fight, i.e. they're fighters. I think it's really good for the sport. I think it's really good that Frank and Eddie have been in the same room a few times. It changes the way people talk about each other. I mean, you heard Eddie last year say that he regretted calling Shelley Finkel Shirley Winkle, and that, it wasn't something he looks back on and is very proud of. To get all our guys together really helps. They will be rivals again. Bob Arum and Frank Warren have been rivals in the past, and they're back together, doing loads of stuff. Tyson Fury was the catalyst for that. So, no, I think it's really good. I think it's really positive. They will be at each other again at some point. There'll be disagreements in the future. They are rivals, however we look at it. But it's a bit like, they'll look back on this time and celebrate it, because this is a time that is enabling those heavyweight matchups to be made with more alacrity than is normally possible. I think it's a great thing. I found myself taking a few pictures of Eddie and Frank together as well when we were over there. It's really good for the sport. I mean, and it's not even papering over the cracks, frankly. They will work together as long as there is investment and interest and growth from the backers. And they'd be foolish not to be involved together in this time, because these big fights are going to happen.
Well, I mean, when you look at kind of, we know not going to say it looked like it was a case of obviously Eddie Hearn being brought to the table where Frank was already at the table in regards to what's happening in Saudi. But from what Eddie Hearn could offer, and also obviously from what Frank offers, it's crazy not to combine the two.
Yeah, exactly. And you look now, Eddie's not going to be announcing events now on the same date as big events in Saudi Arabia. There's that kind of cooperation now. If you recall, he'd initially announced Conor Benn and Chris Eubank on December the 23rd, on the same day as the Day of Reckoning that was originally going to be Fury and Usyk. That'll have put noses out of joint. That won't have made people happy because there was direct rivalry going on there at the time. I don't think that kind of thing will happen now. It's really good for the sport, KUGAN. It's really good because the egos. I say ego. When I say ego, I mean rivalry. The rivalry is not going to go on when they've got an agreement where they're putting a lot of the same fighters on the same cards together. Yes, Queensberry is the promoter that's got the deal with Saudi Arabia and His Excellency and the Riyadh season through the General Entertainment Authority over there. But Eddie's obviously being smart by being involved in it. I think he's still got a part of Bivol, still got a part of he's got Oppenheimer, and he's still got Joshua. So he had three boxers on that Queensberry card over there. You know, so he's made a smart move. He could have stayed on the outside, but that's what His Excellency is doing, and I think they've all admitted that. All the promoters that. He said, look, I don't care about your rivalries. Let's just get you all together, working together, and let's get these big fights made. It's brilliant for the fans. And one of the things I've seen is people complaining about the atmosphere there. When you're there, yes, it's different. It's slightly different. People are growing into it. There's a different temperament over there. And it's not as raucous as we're used to it. But it was still an amazing atmosphere on the night of Day of Reckoning, as it was, I've got to say, for Battle of the Baddest. Very absorbing, intense fights going on, and there's nothing wrong with the atmosphere over there. And I think we'll see more and more fans travelling over to see these big events in 2024.
Yeah, well, you made a good, brought up a little point there about December 23rd, where initially Hearn was obviously hell-bent on having Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. fighting on that 23rd. It would have been interesting to see if that fight would have took place on the 23rd, how that would have changed the dynamic with Saudi and Hearn, etc. Because the only reason that fight didn't happen, the fight didn't happen because they couldn't agree a deal. But it would have been interesting if it had been done for the 23rd and that fight was going ahead on the 23rd, how it would have left this kind of the rest of the landscape regarding like Warren, Hearn, Joshua, etc., Saudi, how that would have played out. What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's you know, we're being recidivist about this and looking back on it and what it might have been, but it wouldn't have worked for boxing, and it wouldn't have worked for them having a relationship, in my view.
Yeah.
But if you recall, it was Fury-Usyk at the time, and I think Fury-Usyk would have knocked Ben Eubank out of the water. So if that had stayed, but so I mean, I'm kind of knocking that question out the water because when Fury and Usyk wasn't going to happen on the 23rd, then that's when they started speaking to Eddie about getting Joshua on that, because there
yeah, knock-on effects. Yeah.
I mean, look, we've had really big events on the same night before in different places. The problem is when it's in America and here, it's fine because the time difference. There's only 2 or 3 hours time difference between here and Riyadh. So, or it would have been 3 hours, wouldn't it, in December? I don't think that would have been a good thing. It would have looked like Eddie was in direct rivalry with what was going on over there. I think he's in the frame now. He's in the group. And I just think the relationship is there now, and I think it will grow. I think I think the Saudi Arabian entity that I've just described, His Excellency and his team, I think the relationship with those promoters that we're talking about will only grow from here on in, you know, for as long as they want to be involved. And because he's such an aficionado of the sport, and he's understanding it all the time, and the work of Spencer Brown in the background, by the way, through the whole Fury link up and lineage with the Saudi Arabians, it just helps our sport. All of it helps our sport. And anyone knocking it at the moment, all they can really say is, oh, it's only happening because of the money. But that's the whole reason it's happening, is because of the money. This is the whole reason that fights went to Las Vegas, to the big casinos in the 80s and 90s, because they were putting huge site fees down so that the purses were right for the boxers and the fights were being made. We've been through a period when the stadiums were being used for big fights, where you could get 80, 90,000 in stadiums over here, and it caused a huge gate. Or when the numbers were big because they were record gates at the T-Mobile or the MGM. It's just, we've got, you know, what we call a paradigm shift going on. There is a change in the landscape, and you just have to go with change. You know, 26 years ago, poor old Jane Couch couldn't get a license, had to go to the High Court. Now she's inducted into Hall of Fame this summer, which I'm delighted about. And many of us in the sport are delighted. I covered that court case of Jane and her first fight at Caesar's Palace, Streatham, with a ceiling about this high. I don't know if you've ever been there.
I've been there many times.
Yeah, and it's like a sticky ceiling, isn't it? And it's sticky floor and sticky ceiling. And literally, the ceiling was that far above them standing in the ring that night. But, you know, change comes. Now women's boxing, we're talking about the growth of it. There's always change. You know, we've had misfits over the last couple of years. Or, you know, some of it is appalling. Some of it's interesting. Some of it's good. The Logan and Jake Paul axis and the KSI axis meeting with Tommy Fury this year has been fascinating. But it's change. You can analyze change, you know, and it gets the echo chamber and the prism of social media. I think reverberates with a lot of kind of noise, a lot of dark noise, if you like. But boxing's in a really healthy, rude, healthy place, I think. I don't know if you agree, but that's what I think.
I think we can see better light at the end of the tunnel at the moment as it currently sits. I think we can kind
Look at the start of 2024. We've got Callum Smith and Beterbiev in Quebec. We've got Tasha Jonas and Michaela Mayer in Liverpool. We've got Lewis Crocker and Felix in Belfast. We've got Johnny Fisher fighting in Vegas. We've got Conor Benn fighting in Vegas. And we've got the hearing coming up for that, which is interesting. We've got John Ryder and Munguia. We've got, I think, there's I can't think of the others right. There's loads of fights already to get excited about. Fury and Usyk on the 17th of Feb, only 6 weeks away, 40 odd days away. It's brilliant. But what a great start to the year.
Well, one of the disappointments, obviously, of say kind of the back end of last year too, which follows on to this year, is the collapse of the Eubank and Ben fight. Obviously, we know Conor Benn, his next fight has been scheduled against Dobson on the 3rd of February, as you mentioned, in Las Vegas. Are we ever going to see this fight, Gareth?
I think we need to see Conor win a couple of fights convincingly and well, and I think Eubank will probably have a fight in the middle and realise in the end there's so much money in that fight, there's so much interest still, and that he's got so many advantages at middleweight if he faces the welterweight Ben at middleweight, that it's a no-brainer. But it might take till the end of the year to have this fight, in my view. But I think right now, to use a recent Eddie Hearn term, I think it's a little dead in the water, or certainly the tide's gone out on it. Let me put it that way. The tide's gone out on it. At some point, as the moon comes up, the tide will come in again, and it will come into focus. Let's see what happens. I think next week or the week after, with this hearing. And if Conor Benn wins his jurisdiction case or appeal from the board and UKAD, he's able to rock on, in my view, because otherwise it'll be restraint of trade against him getting a license in the UK. Because Eddie clearly wants to put it on in the stadium in the UK, and that's where to do it. Doesn't work in Saudi, doesn't work in America. It's a stadium fight. It's a nostalgia, a fun nostalgia fight in the UK for those that remember the fathers of the sons, you know?
Name me 3 fights, if you could pick any, that you want to see in 2024. And they can't involve the same fighter.
Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez.
Okay.
Saul Canelo Alvarez de Jalisco, Guadalajara, Mexico, against David Benavidez.
Okay.
And Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua.
Okay.
If those 3 fights happen this year, I'm going to be running around like a headless chicken, I'm telling you. We all will, because, I mean, I think Fury and Joshua, if it happens, will push into 2025, in my view. But if that could happen this year, it'd be amazing.
Well, it's only the 4th of January, so we can hope for the best.
And I'm giving you a 6.5 out of 10 for last year, maybe a 7.
No, I'll give myself a 4, mate.
Here's one for you, right? You gave Eddie a 6.5, yeah?
Yeah, but I wasn't having a dig at him. I just
What
mean.
do you give Frank Warren?
Oh.
Is this where you edit out of the video and don't?
No, I'm not editing nothing. I may not answer it, because whatever I say is gonna.
I thought Eddie had a very, very good year, but I think
I
Frank
thought,
Warren had
listen,
a slightly better year, in my view, because of what's
I
happened.
should have asked Eddie. What I should have done was I should have asked Eddie.
What he's giving Frank?
What do you think? I'm actually going to catch up with Frank soon. I'll ask Frank, vice versa. It's interesting to see how they now look at how they perceive 2023. But I wasn't having a dig at Eddie. I was just saying that there was a lot of stuff that went against him in 2023 that didn't materialise, and it's not a fault of his own. But I suppose I can't give him. He gave himself an 8, right? I know he can do better than an 8, right? So I wouldn't have given him an 8. That's why maybe a 7 was a better score for him.
Yeah, but Eddie plays that game as he did in that interview, where he's got the cover of not GQ, of Men's Health. He's got himself in great shape this year. He says he's going to be in Hollywood movies soon. He's playing that game with you because he works extraordinarily hard. We know how driven he is. We also know that he's got an ego, but he knows that as well. And his ego is part parody as well. So I thought he had an outstanding year. I think Frank Warren had a slightly more outstanding year, in my view. And I know people always say, "Oh, I'm a Frank fanboy," all this crap. But Frank had an extraordinary year. When he said game changer, he really did change the game with the investiture of the involvement of the Saudi Arabians, particularly with the heavyweight division. It really did change the game. And in some ways, the two of them working together, I think, anyway. That's almost one of the most important things to have happened late in the year, because it augurs well for this year now that those two guys are working together. And there's such a power base in the UK at the moment. Of course, we want to see the Devin Haney, Teo Lopez, Shaka Stevenson, Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis, all those guys progress and come on in the States this year. But we've got so many fighters like the cruiserweight division over here that needs to get moving with the inclusion of Jaya Pataya. And I'd like to see Eddie working more with Ben Shalom and that group of fighters to get those cruiserweight fights done before Opataya, who's not the biggest guy in the world, steps up to heavyweight, because he certainly will, because he's got the power. Even if he hasn't got the size, he's got the speed and power, and the money, the big money's up there as well.
What do you give yourself, Gareth, for 2023?
I don't mark myself, mate. I'll leave that up to other people. I can't give myself. I just try and work hard. I mean, you know, I mean, it's. I don't know. I don't. I can't assess myself 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 or 4 out of 10. I mean, I just do what I do. It's not. It's not. You know, what's that? 0.
No, it's a heart.
Yeah, exactly. I'm giving myself a love out of 10. That's it.
Okay, well, look, like I said, there's a lot to be pieced together this year, and I hope kind of when we reflect on 2024 at the end of this year that we're kind of looking back and going, well, you know, we wanted this, we wanted that, this happened, that happened. Because I think there is an air of
Optimism. Optimism, isn't there?
optimism, yeah, a real air of optimism for 2024, and I just hope it delivers, and hopefully, you know, it won't just be champagne boxing; it'll be champagne and caviar boxing, you know.
That's a very good point as well. No, but we need the from the bottom up to work as well in boxing, as well as the top down. And I think that's where we'll begin. As the top down looks very successful this year as it goes on, we've got to look and see how we draw from the bottom up as well, with the small hall shows, with smaller promoters, with that's got to be looked after as well, in my view.
Sorry, just in that running you were talking about, kind of in the first couple of months of 2024, Buatsi and Aziz.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great fight. Great fight. Two friends fighting each other, both with so much to gain and lose. You know, you see Buatsi technically as probably the favourite, but Dan Aziz will get the very best out of him. Aziz, probably one of the most improved boxers in the UK in the last couple of years, if not in Europe or even the world. It's a terrific fight. It's delayed. Cannot wait for it. And now there's a bit of spite between them as well, because that time in between has allowed it to marinate a little bit. So, yeah, looking forward to being at that one as well.
Okay, well, Gareth, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure we'll be pestering you as the year ponders on.
You never pester me. It's always a pleasure.
Are you covering any shows coming up soon?
I am indeed. I'm going to be at Callum Smith and Artur Beterbiev, nipping out to Quebec for that bit of work for ESPN, top rank on that one, bit of TV work. And then I'm going to be with TalkSport at Natasha Jonas and Michaela Meyer up in Liverpool. I see Jonas as a decent favourite in that one. It's going to be a tough night for Callum Smith against Beterbiev. I mean, I'd love him to do brilliantly and win those 3 belts, but I'd also like to see Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol this year as well. So, you know, I'm a bit torn on that one. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to nip over to Vegas for the Conor Benn and Johnny Fisher event. So I may well go to that early Feb as well. And then it's Saudi in mid-Feb, and I'm going to go well in advance for that. So it's on the road, baby, on the road.
Gareth, thank you very much for your time. We'll definitely catch up with you at one of these events, whichever one it is. And yeah, I hope you had a good Christmas, a wonderful New Year, and yeah, all good.
Get that tree down soon, eh?
Yeah, I'd get that down, mate.
We're going to get a big bonfire out in the paddock. Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
I'm fine.